Hello and welcome to another edition of Passion, Purpose and Grit. My guest today is a rugby legend, a former colleague and a friend. Gareth Chilcott was a cornerstone of the Bath team that dominated English rugby in the 80s. Before the Premiership was introduced, they monopolised the Cup. When the Premiership came in, they won that as well. Gareth, or Cooch as he's universally known, also played for England and the British and Irish Lions, before carving out a career in the media. And here we are working together at Goldster in the 90s. The facial hair's changed a bit. As a sought-after after-dinner speaker, he's also appeared in panto and serious drama before going on to enormous success in the hospitality and rugby tours business. One of those figures who transcends his sport. He's also been faced with the early death of his wife and a life-saving liver transplant. And he's here today, I'm happy to say, to tell the tale and many, many more, no doubt. Welcome, Coochie, Gareth. I call you Coochie, everybody calls you Coochie. Why Cooch? Why were you called Cooch?
Iggy, you know as well as I do, it goes back so far, even when I was a young lad. So it's sort of pelled, nobody really knows. I think it was probably when I was really young, 4 or 5, I was sort of cuddly and Coochie Bear, Coochie, but it's stuck. And even my parents, God bless them, they're gone now, but they called me Cooch and Coochie, and all my mates do, all my colleagues at work, you know. So Cooch is here to stick. Very few people call me Gareth nowadays.
Well, Cooch, I'm glad about that. We can sort that one out. You mentioned your parents there. Your dad was Di, the Welshman. Was your mum Welsh as well?
No, my mum was a good old Bristolian, Bedminster girl. Worked in the Wills's tobacco factory and making cigars. So she was a factory girl. But my father used to work down the pits in Ogmore Vale, South Wales. And then he came across Bristol for a night out, met my mother, and didn't really go back to Wales. He got a job in the printing industry then in Robinson's DRG, which is another, you know, Bristol as well as I do, which is another big, or used to be a really big employer of people in Bristol, along as well as the Wills's tobacco. So yeah, it's so we met a good Bristolian. So we put him right, did a bit of charity work with him, and got him over the bridge back into Bristol.
And what about sporting pedigree? Mum and Dad.
My father played a bit of rugby up the valleys. He played for a club called Nanty Mall in Ogmore Vale, which is village size, but it had been tough rugby, no doubt about that. You know as well as I do, going across to them sort of places back in the day. We didn't need a ball. It wasn't in anybody's game plan. It was always raining. It was always fiery. There was no TV cameras. Anything went. You grew up very quickly over there. So my father didn't really play anything top level wise, and my mother really just enjoyed chatting, friends, gin, anything else. It took her fancy, really. She was a buxom barmaid down in some of the pubs in Bedminster when we were younger. But they were good to me. But you know me, Higgy. I wasn't the easiest of kids to bring up. You know as well as I do. At 15, my father, quite rightly so, lobbed me out, made me homeless. And I had good friends. It took me in sort of 2 or 3 weeks later after a couple of weeks in the local park. But we've made up, obviously, years ago, and we moved on. But I wasn't the easiest kid to bring up, I don't think. So God bless them.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say you weren't over fond of school, really, were you?
No, I think I knew where it was, basically, but I never actually went there. And I say at 15, they lobbed me out of that one as well. So I wasn't academic. I was always a people's person. I love company. I love people. I like my own space, but I like my own time. And I'm happy with my own person and my own space. But I'm really happier when I'm with friends or people or chatting. And rugby is a great sport for that, Iggy. Me and you, before we come on air, we're talking about a mutual friend, Ian Robinson. But it's nostalgia. It's about stories. It's about friendships. It's about comradeship. And that's why I think I took to rugby rather than the football fan fighting type of route I could have taken.
Yeah, and that's a lovely story as well. And there's another link between us. The teacher that turned you on to rugby also taught my son a bit later on at time. Tell us that story about how you got into rugby.
Well, I basically finished playing. I didn't have the advantage of mini rugby as you've got nowadays. I was basically, you know what I was like in them days in the part of Bristol I was brought up in. I was a Bristol City fan, still am to a big degree, but I used to follow them around as a young pup, getting into trouble. And I had bans for not watching football and everything else. And my old teacher, Norman Ridgway, just said, look, you're not doing anything on a Saturday. You can't go and watch your beloved City. Come up to a local rugby club. And he was right after an old side called All Redcliffeans, or Reds. And it was a brilliant club because back in the day when Bristol Docks were thriving, they were all Dockers. It was a club to go to. You either went to Avonmouth or All Reds if you were a Docker. So I all of a sudden, as a young age, got involved with this club where it was hard men. I soon realized that you could have fun without going overboard. There was always someone to clip your ears when you could, and it was that peer pressure. And it just got me back on the sort of straight and narrow a little bit. And I could still get my aggression out on the rugby field. I played 1 year for the Colts, 1 year for the first team. And then basically Bath came a knock in and I went over there with a big docker called Derek Barry. So Norman Ridgway have got a huge amount to answer for. He got me, as I say, out of the it's an old cliche, but out of the gang situation back into rugby, which, as you know, is a sport for all walks of life, shapes and sizes, back in them days particularly. And I'll always be thankful to Norman.
Yeah, and the story I remember is you're talking about bunking off double arc on a Wednesday.
Oh yeah. Well, I used to play truant quite a bit. Once I realised I went academically, and Norman used to say to me, "Look, where are you going? What are you doing? You're going to be hanging around a park or up the local, what we call Lady Smythes, which is Aston Court Country Club in lots of grounds." And he said, "What I'll do is I'll leave a rugby ball down behind the third tree of a particular place that we knew." So when I used to not go to school, I used to go along, or if I went into school for a couple of hours because I liked the sports bit at the start, I would then, rather than go off to the maths and everything else, I would go along and find the ball that he secretly hid, and then I would go up with a couple of my mates up to the out of sight, and play about with a rugby ball. So he was a modern thinking teacher. I don't know whether I'm doing any favors, but I know he's retired now. He went on to have a really good career in the education. He used to hide a ball for me, so I could. He used to say, if you're going out there, do something useful, kick a ball about.
Yeah, absolutely. He's an inspirational man, one of those great teachers that you come across.
Yeah, and you remember all your life.
Yeah, absolutely. So that got you started. You got into the Old Red side. And then and the combination, as you mentioned, I remember first arriving in Bristol, and the combination is just below the top class level, but it was mighty tough, mighty hard, and very, very parochial, wasn't it? In its
you were a part of a club, Ian. You know as well as I do where I live, where I'm sat here now, within 10 minutes drive either way, there's 28 rugby clubs. Yeah. All of different levels and all different. I mean, back in the day, they always had their 4 sides, and it was very tribal, and you didn't have leagues, so you didn't travel far. You had what we call the Bristol combination, and they would occasionally play the Bath combination, which is 7 miles away, and then you had the Goldster combination, which is 30 miles up the motorway. So there was a lot of rivalry. There was always local derbies. Everybody played each other, and it was, not a game for the faint-hearted. It was fantastic rugby. But of course, them days have gone now. The teams are less. A lot of the junior clubs are struggling. Leagues have come in and they've had to travel, distances, and people work on the Saturday. So, it's a different game now, but it was fantastic and really tough rugby back in them days. Yeah. And every club had plenty of players, which is lovely to see.
And back in my day, the Old Reds linked to Bristol. We had a lot of front row forwards came to Bristol from the Old Reds. So why didn't you go to Bristol? Why did you go to Bath?
Well, All Reds was, I'm a funny bugger. All Reds was Somerset affiliated, where everything in Bristol, for anybody who's not Bristolian, there's a thing called the Cut, which is a river that was made from French prisoner of wars back in the Napoleon days. And if you're south, generally speaking, south of the Cut has got the three big housing estates, biggest unemployment in Bristol, in the southwest. And I was born in the middle of them sort of housing estates, or Bedminster, Harcliffe, North West. And if you were south of the Cut, you supported Bristol City for one, you supported Somerset cricket for two, and you really supported Bath rugby. I know, you know, and if you go north of the river, which was 2/3 of Bristol, you were Bristol, Gloucestershire, and Gloucestershire County Cricket. Although there was a few rebels here and there, but that was generally how the sort of sporting layout was. And so I was always going to go to Bath, but also I went up to Bristol for a training session, and of course Bristol were a fantastic club. They were better than Bath in them days, as you know, Iggy. And I went up there, but they only had two teams, and I came from All Reds, which is very much a community, working class, you know, tough club. And I went up to Bristol, and I went there for the first day's training. And after, the first team was in one part of the clubhouse, the United was in the other end of the clubhouse, all looking about. And I was sort of stuck in the middle with about 2 or 3 other people that were asked to train. The week after, I went to Bath, who had 3 teams. And when I went in that clubhouse, even though Bath weren't quite as good as Bristol then, everybody mixed. It was, you know, the third team sort of was like a conduit between the first and United. It just made it a club feeling, you know, and I just quite liked that. And then, of course, I went. The day I joined, Jack Rowell also joined. So, and the rest is history. We then sort of developed a winning culture and went on for decades of successful rugby. And it was interesting, even to the end. You know, the first team would play somebody like Leicester at home, and then we'd wait in the clubhouse to the Spartans, which was the third team, to get back on their coach because they were away at Chippenham, you know, and then we'd all go out as a team. So my Bath mates are Jerry Gustin, Stuart Barnes, John Horn, you know, but are also, you know, mates that played for the Spartans, you know, and so it was more of a rugby club feeling for me, which I like to feel a part of something bigger than myself. And I thought Bath gave me that, you know, the fact that we went on to be successful was a right bonus, really.
How different was it from the old Reds then in terms of the approach and the quality of teammates?
Well, as soon as you went there, you realised the quality of player. You know, you had John Horton, John Palmer, who was still one of the finest. You know, you had John Hall. You had these players that were, you know, magnificent. David Trick. You know, just breathtaking players. So for me, going across on the bus or by the train, you know, with me Bristol City bobble hat on, you know, still had me Bristol City, keep the Robins there, you know, and I was going in, I was like a fish out of water, to be honest with you. A, they couldn't understand me. B, I was a bit rough and ready for them. And it was as if the, you know, Bath have decided that they were going to let Waithen Strays in, you know, and you know, they let me in, which some of the committee men cringed, I think. But then sort of season later, they let Roger Spurrell in, the old Cornish and wing forward, who, as you know, Higgy, loved chewing bones if it needed chewing. And so between the two of us, all of a sudden, without sounding pretentious, all of a sudden Bath had a hard edge. They had all the nice football skills, but going away to Gloucester or to Bristol, you know, and the Mike Fries and the Austin Shepherds, you know, and going away down to Meath on a wet Tuesday night, they play lovely rugby, but they'd always get beat. Now all of a sudden they were fighting fire with fire, and you know, once you can do that, and you begin to get a bit, you know, and nobody loved to come to the rec. Beautiful rec, you know, surrounded by beautiful Georgian, you know, bar buildings. But on the rugby field, it was a small sort of enclosed area. You know, we had lots of internationals. You know, and most of the years I played at Bath, we had 15 internationals inside. They didn't come as internationals. We developed them internationals. And it was a different kettle of fish then. You know, the lovely Harlequins coming down with their cravats didn't really like the day, which is nice.
Yeah. But the Bath approach was different. That was at the time when, I mean, people now look at rugby as a professional game. It wasn't in the 90s, was it? But it was just starting to move.
It was. And Jack Rowell was sorry, you cut in, but Jack Rowell was particularly forward chatting. You know, we for the first time in rugby clubs, you know, we had the senior players mentoring. My first person I mentored was a young Jerry Gusta, you know, and he's personal, you know, dearest, one of my dearest friends now, you know, but I had him as a young pup, you know, and, you know, he came in with all the skills, but none of the sort of social, he didn't really know what was going on. And so we had mentoring systems. We were the first club to, you know, look at, we raised money through social events as a welfare thing for if anybody fell on the hard times. You know, if one of the Spartans broke a leg and he couldn't pay his mortgage, you know, the club would help him out through what we did as a way of fundraising, which was again unheard of in that sort of era. You know, the RFU was watching us all the time, thinking that we were breaking all kinds of rules and we were getting paid. We were well looked after. Jack Rowell sort of said, listen, if I want you to be athletes, I'll treat you like an athlete. So we bent over backwards to get good kit, good transport, good hotels when we stayed. We were one of the first team to, even if we were playing Gloucester at the road, we'd go up on a Friday night and get together. So, you know, in a hotel, it was that sort of semi-professional era that was coming in to slowly take us, and we were ahead of our time. It was just such a shame that when it did go professional, Bristol and Gloucester sort of shot straight into it, and we still mamby-pambied around a bit. It took a while for Bath to really get into the grips, and I think that slowly but surely has been the decline of Bath, even though we're still in the Premiership. And it looks like there's a bit more light at the end of the tunnel. It's been, you'd have to say, from the heady times of when I played and a lot of the other ones who kept the thing going for a few years after we all retired. It's been a pretty lean 6 or 7 years for Bath.
Yeah, I remember though when I was working with HTV and we'd collaborated on a video called "Never in Doubt," which was a phrase the Bath players used about going up to Twickenham to win the cup every time. And we did this video, and my memory is that apart from Jack Rowell bringing this, you know, really severe discipline, if you like, but treating you like athletes, there were also two other key figures. It was Tom Hudson and Dave Robson, who really seemed to be important as well. Yeah,
Dave Robson was very much the fixer. He would recruit. He was, you know, we would recruit people back in the day before contracts. You know, we'd go off in, say, the Ben Clark Ben. You know, you're playing for Saracens. They're nobody Saracens. It's a bit different now. Yeah. Come and join us. You know, and we'll get you a job. You know, we won't pay you, but we'll get you a job that'll give you as much time off for training or open doors in career. And so, you know, that was the sort of way, and Dave Robson was very much involved with that. Tom was very much ex-military. He had, you know, novel different ways of training and interval training. He was ahead of his time. That a lot of the time we were in the swimming pool. You know, we were the first club team really to go down to Lanzarote, down to the training facilities and train there. Portugal. It was only international sites that went, but all of a sudden Bath were doing it as well. You know, so it was all that sort of stuff. And then you had Jack Rowell, who was really the overseer. You know, Jack was, if you gave Jack a team for a weekend to win something, he would be absolutely hopeless. But if you gave him a team, over a period of time, so he could get to, the wrong word, manipulate, but he got to know the players and knew how to, you know, my biggest fear was losing. You know, I'm very, very competitive. I'll do anything not to lose, you know, no matter what I'm doing, you know, and Jack knew that. So Jack would treat me slightly different to somebody that, you know, like John Hall, who was doing it for different reasons. You know, he was very good at sort of molding over a period of time a team that sort of worked together, dovetail. It had his non-frilly stars like me, and it had his stars like Stuart Barnes and Jerry Guska, for example. He knew how to select it. And I think, you know, you've played sport at a top level, both cricket and rugby, Iggy. When you get to the top end, or an England coach, it's not about saying, oh, I want your foot position here, you know, coach, you want to do this. It's about selection majority of the time. It's about making a team that gel together, and you look at this England team at the moment, fantastic players, but they don't seem to achieve anything because they don't seem as one. And I think that was what all great successful sides do. That's what Saracens do now. That's what we did back in the day.
So would you say that was the secret of Bath, just being ahead of time, or was it a nice combination that all the players came at the same time, or did they become because the approach was different?
Yeah, I mean, most of the people came as non-internationals, and we made them internationals.
Yeah,
i.e. playing in a successful side. Even selectors looked at that. It was a combination of everything, the training sessions, the togetherness, we made time every day to train if we could, or they got us jobs that could give us time off. And he, we had like Richard Hill and Stewart. He was a great believer in union. So Richard Hill, Stuart Barnes, 9 and 10. What a halfback club partnership. Back row, Sprower to do the nitty gritty, be on the ball all the time. John Hall, who, if he didn't have to do his knee in the World Cup in '87 when I played, he'd have been probably one of the best ever known back row forwards in the world. He was, unbelievable. And you had all these people. You had Paul Simpson come, and he recruited Paul. Paul came down on a Barbarians tour to South Wales, came to Bath, met his beloved wife, Kim, and we, Jack realised you might as well stay here now, not going back up north, because he knew he would gel in as that runner. A dear friend of ours, David Egerton, God bless him, is gone in COVID. He had a different type of age, so he would pick a side that against the opposition that he knew would compete. He was a very astute, intelligent, rugby brain, and business brain. He went on to do all kinds of things. His captain of industry and everything else. But so it was a combination of everything really. But Tom Hudson's training facility, techniques, Jack's overall seeing it, Dave Robson's sort of hard-nosed, disciplinary sort of recruiting type. Jack would say we need that to blend well with us. Go out and get him, David. And David would go out and do whatever he needed to do. So it was all that. But of course, in the end of the day, Higgy, you can talk about behind the scenes. As well as I do, you played in Great Bristol sides. You need the players, and you look at the front row, it dominated. It was me, Graham Dole, Richard Lee, big farmer from Somerset. When Richard was getting a little bit too old, so they bring Victor Bugu, moved me to tight end. It was always a conveyor belt of good players. It would fit not just on the rugby field, but into the culture of what Bath was. And I think that's the biggest thing. You can get a lot of good players, i.e. England again, but unless you get the culture of winning, like Saracens have got, it never quite, you're always a good side, but never what you classify a great side. And Leicester had it back in the day. England on there in 2003 had it, sorry about the noise. That's my dog going mental with my daughter coming in. So it was a combination of everything. And Bath in that sort of 10, 15 year spell were really, really, really good at bringing people in. David Saul, I was continuously getting banned. So David Saul for when I was banned. And you mustn't forget people like dear old Chris Lilly, who's a United player who stepped up every time I got injured or banned, done the job, fitted in. And that's what was great. It was a bit like New Zealand rugby. Everybody played the same way, had the same idea. And when somebody was injured, somebody just slotted in. Great.
And you were talking about balancing rugby with your job at the time, because it wasn't professional like it is now. And you had to have a job, however little or much you did of the job. You had a succession of quite interesting jobs whilst you were playing.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the majority, I was always a doorman. So I always worked on the clubs, which was great because apart from Friday and Saturday or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I was always working on the doors. And if I was playing home, I'd get back to bounce in a particular club in Bristol, which is quite rough, called the Chasers. You've probably been up there occasionally.
Not me.
But I also, when I was, I've been a French polisher, I've been a lumberjack, cutting trees down. I owned the Funa Directors, chauffeur link. So I had a car hire company when the Americans actually came to Bath and spent money. But my main job has always been, which the job I love is sports travel. And which means I take people around the world to watch sport. And funny enough, I got to go with them. And that's fantastic because I'm watching sport, mainly rugby, but we do cricket, but I don't always make them tours, but rugby tours, yeah. So I'm watching rugby. I'm with friends, like-minded people, and I'm mixing and mingling with people, and I'm seeing beautiful parts of the world. And that's been great. And, you know as well as I do, you were a great tourist. We've been all over the place. So, we've been to South Africa working on the TV, on Australia, Fiji. So, you know as well as I do, because you are and have been one of the great tourists, because not all rugby players are great tourists, but there's certain people who've got that little twinkle in their eye and love what they're doing, which you have and had, which has always been a joy, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of fun we had on the circuit. I just want to take you back a little bit, because playing for England, that was obviously an important thing for anybody, any Englishman. Did you feel your England career was a little bit curtailed?
Yes, definitely. I got selected in '84 against the magnificent Grand Slam Australia side. I ended up hitting Farr Jones down, so that had me politely told I won't be selected for a season or so. And I missed the Romania game the next week, which was that one. Then I got in trouble off the field in France, and that sort of hit me a bit. Now, and can I say straight away, and you know this saying in Bristol, that's not me babby-assing. That's not me complaining. I did it. I take the punishment. That's what I've always done. And then, of course, in Wales, the Battle of Cardiff, the famous Battle of Cardiff, and they roll out the footage every 2 years and ask me what I felt. 20 years on, or whatever it was, 30 years on. So I lost about I think 12 caps before I got recalled. And then I got banned. I got a 6 weeks ban and an 8 week ban. But the one that really hit me was I got a year's ban for playing against Bristol, funny enough. My dear friend now, Bob Esford, he got caught on the wrong side of a ruck. And we're friends now. But Clive Norland, the famous Welsh perm referee, didn't quite see it in the same light. And sent me off, and I ended up getting banned for 12 months. So that sort of hit me back again. And remember, as well as I do, you played in that era. Twickenham didn't really like bad boys come. They were always they were always looking at the sort of Oxford, Cambridge University, and I certainly didn't go to university, as you know. So it took me a while on the ability. So yes, I think my England career could have been a lot better if I'd have just kept my nose clean. It'd probably been another 20, 30 caps. But I also did England. I played in the first World Cup in '87. I also went on the Lions tour, successful Lions tour to Australia. So, I'm not complaining or babby-assing, but I made my bed, I'd lie in it.
Yeah, was the reputation as a rough, tough, dirty player, did it sort of go ahead of you all the time, that once you'd got that reputation, everybody's looking out for you?
Yeah, I think so. But I like contact. I like confrontation. I still do. Even at 66, I'm still happy to have a row with somebody if they ever row. It does you good, But yeah, I would always want to be, especially in the front row. All I wanted to do is just, rugby's quite a simple game. You make it complicated now. If everybody dominates his opposite number, and I'm not talking sort of centre against centre, but even nowadays that does apply. Yeah. But in the front row, second row, back row, if everybody dominates his opposite player, and 12 of you do that, you won the game. So every time I played against somebody, it didn't always happen, I tried to dominate the other player, and that was both physically, mentally, intimidationary wise. But again, I played in a different era, Higgy. You know, nowadays you break wind on a rugby field and you're sighted. You know, it's you know, and there's probably a camera that caught it. You know, it's a different game, and quite rightly so, it's a different game. I'm glad I played in my era, because I certainly wouldn't have been allowed to play now. But you know, but I got so much. You know, we talked to Mike Fry at Bristol Prop. You know, and he lives just over the couple of blocks there. You know, and he's in a bad way at the moment. You know, with Parkinson's, and he's got a voice box. And we still, you know, and even though he played for Bristol against us, we had some great rucks and battles. A tough man. You know. But he was a gentleman as well, you know, and I think that's slightly gone in the modern day rugby. And I got so much time for the modern day game. I think it's great. I think it's got problems with financial and being sustainable. London Irish now look like they're the next one going. But, you know, I played in an era where, you know, it was physical. It was not so quick of a game, obviously. Athletically, it wasn't as much, but thuggery, I mean, it was there in abundance.
Yeah, a great career. And I remember your farewell game and the celebrations that followed. Did you know at the time that, you know, obviously we knew you were going to retire. Had you come to the conclusion that you'd done enough rugby, or it was time to go?
Before, yeah, I think so. The All Bones was, because I played quite late in you know, in career, and I just I remember being on a Sunday night. I was on the treatment table to get fit for training the next day, not for a game, but for the game. So I had a long chat with Jack Rowell, and he wanted me to go on for another year. And he sort of said, you know, but we'll pick you for the big games. You know, we'll play you for the 10 real big games we need to win. But I was at the age where I enjoyed playing, but I didn't enjoy training. You know, and I just said, Jack, I tell you what, play me every game and cut me training down, and use the games to keep me fit, and I'll stay another year. He said, oh, no, we can't do that, because we've got to bring in youngsters on. And I said, well, you've answered your own question then, haven't you? Yeah. I'll retire. So I played up to the Christmas, and I went into pantomime. I was offered a job like Ian Boson had done before, and Frank Bruno had done before. I was offered a pantomime. In fact, I'd done 3 on the shop, and so I retired, did that, and then went back after that. You know, so that was a clean break. I signed the contract. You know, I took the money for the pantomime, knowing that by the time I go back, it's gone now. You know, and that was my clean cut. And I've not played since. I've never been offered, you know, I've been offered to go back to local clubs in second division, but no, I was long in the booth. I've done everything in rugby. I was happy to go out as there was, and then it was great, because we did some stuff down in Bristol with HTV and then ITV, and you know, me and you, sort of our relationship bloomed from there. So yeah, it's been great.
Let's go back to the final game and the party afterwards, because that's sort of gone down in folklore since then. I remember Dave Edgerton, he was a sort of MC for your This Is Your Life, and introduced you as half man, half bowling ball, which
yeah. I mean, it was a surprise. It was we were always going to have a bit of a well up, you know, and it was always going to be. But yeah, they did This Is Your Life stuff. And, I'm surprised they didn't bring back people that I kicked and punched. Yeah. But it was great to see it. It was lovely to have your peers, you know, sending off. The drink was flowing. I think there was a particular brew which will be known in the West Country as Cheddar Valley, which is a cloudy, scrumpy type cider. I can't remember much after midnight, but it was a fantastic night, and everybody was there, and the club was great because they let the fans in. Yeah. You know, nowadays you can't hardly get in any of the bars, but back in the day, as in Bristol, as in Gloucester, the players used to go to the bar and the fans would be around. You know, and so it was a really, really good night. But we've had plenty of good nights over the years. Yeah. That memorable. And if I remember rightly, you're partial to a bit of red occasionally.
Allegedly. Yeah, and for that famous quote, "I'm going to have 2 quiet pints, a couple of quiet pints, and 17 noisy ones." That's sort
Yeah,
of come down and gone round the world, hasn't it? It's,
it has. Yeah, and I don't know where I got that from, but I don't know why I would thought of it. But they interviewed me after the game, and they just said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to have a couple of quiet beers and 17 loud ones," and basically that's what we did. Just setting the scene.
and getting into the media. I mean, I remember working for HTV at the time, the local TV thing, and we had John Pullin,
Yeah,
famous English and British Lions,
fantastic.
forward as our sort of rugby man. But it was time to move on, and we were so lucky to get you and persuade you to come along and be our sort of rugby expert
Every Friday night, yeah.
every Friday night. And but you took to it like a duck to water. Is that how it felt to you, or did you feel nerves?
Yeah, I'm very happy. People say, "Do you feel nervous if you get on a stage and there's 500 people and you've got to tell a few stories?" No, I don't really. You can only, it's a bit like rugby. You can only do your best. And if people don't think your best is good enough, they'll soon tell you and get rid of you. And the phone keeps ringing. If I want to do a dinner, I don't do many now because I can't be asked, to be honest with you. But yeah, so that on the Friday with friends and people with Big Sid Lawrence as well, doing the cricket stuff. It was great fun. And I'll say it as it is. And I've gotten bits of trouble over the years by saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. And I still do a bit now for BBC Bristol and a lovely Jeff Twentyman's just retired, but I do that because I like the people I work with. It's not, you're never going to get rich at BBC, are you? But, but it was just nice to do it. And which is why I was doing it with you on the Friday. It was just good fun when I was with mates talking sport. The fact that you had a camera there is if you're getting nervous about that, then you don't really make it. But I think the only time I really was, like I worked with our mutual friend Ian Robinson for BBC 5 Live for so many years. But the game had changed. There were so many Samoans and Fijians in the sides, and I couldn't pronounce their name. I struggle with English at the moment, and so in the end, I was, Robert would write them out sort of in big letters on how to pronounce it, and even then, when I was excited, I'd get it all wrong. So I think Robert tells half his bloody stories about me after dinner stories. So in the end, I had to go. I got no bones about it. He sort of come to me and said, "Look, you can't pronounce names. You've got, but I do my local stuff, and I enjoy that. And I'm sure there'll be a time when they come along and tell me I'm past my sell-by date. But that's life, isn't it?"
Yeah. Well, in the intro, I put up a picture of us working together at Kingsholm doing it.
I've seen it. It was fantastic, Dave.
It was good fun. But I remember also a game at Bristol where you hurt yourself, and we had to use one of those cherry pickers, didn't we?
I remember. Yeah. I did my knee, and I think it was. And at Bristol, you had to go up a ladder, a curve with a sort of safety bar right to the top of the stand. And I couldn't get up there, so you had a cherry picker with a camera man. But so they moved it, and I went up on the chair. Oh, I got a terrible stick from the crowd. You fat. Because Bristolians, no, I've always been a Bristolian. I've always lived in the Bristol postcode. I still do. Yeah. But obviously playing for a Bristolian going over to Bath in them days, 7 miles down the road and playing for the arch enemy was always an issue.
Yeah, because that stand was the standing stand.
It was getting down worse.
It took you such a long time to get you up and over the barrier, and the stick you were getting was.
It's easier to get a well off a beach, isn't it, back into the sea than get me into that position.
But then you moved on to ITV, and ITV got the Rugby World Cup in 91, didn't they?
They did.
That was a great time for me. As one of the commentators, I enjoyed it so much. But you guys, as the presenters and the summarisers, you seem to have a whale of a time as well.
Well, we met at a place called the Petersham, where England used to stay in Richmond, and there was great Gordon Brown, Gordon from Troon. Sadly, he's passed away now. And a dear friend of mine who I still see regularly, is one of my biggest clients. We meet up for a weekend. A great man, Steve Smith, the old England Grand Slam scrum half Smithy. Manchester boy. He's real. Jack the lad, brilliant bloke, absolutely breathtaking man. And he's still a personal friend. But there was the three of us together in the Petersham, and that was our base for sort of 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And they'd come in sort of the night before and said, right, tomorrow morning, you, Smithy, we got a car, we're taking you to Pontypridd to do Tonga versus Samoa. And then the next day they'd come and say, Brownie, Smithy, and you're going to Murrayfield to what, So it was just so much fun. It was like a tour within a tour, and of course I've had a liver transplant, not through the drink that I had, even though it could have been. But I was drinking back in them days, and God, the drinking, the stories. And of course, apart from that trio that were there in 91, we also had the great commentators like yourself, but also we brought in sort of, they're called celebs now, but well-known rugby players as well. So it was like, it was fantastic time. It really was.
Yeah, it was really. And that was, sort of from the history of the way rugby has been broadcast. That was such a groundbreaking.
Well, it was, because it was like a populist thing. It was fun rather than doing the very ABC. It was fun. Brownie was sort of Gordon Brown was saying, well, I'll do a Morris dance if so and so wins, and it was that sort of thing. In fact, it was so much chemistry between the three of us. When it ended that World Cup, they were signed us up for a theatre tour. So we'd go around the country, me and Brownie and Smithy occasionally. Of course, Smithy was really busy with his cotton traders, but we'd go around the country into theatres, and the place was packed out, just telling stories. And we'd bring in, if we were in, say, Manchester, we'd bring in John Bentley as well as us, but so around, it was great fun. And that was because there was a lot of chemistry in that 91. We had some fun. We weren't so stuffy that it had to be done this way. If we went off on a tangent and told a little anecdote, that was great. I think that World Cup was the World Cup that actually brought the real rugby into the fast lane of populism, whatever, I don't know what the word is, but I really think it changed from the old rugby special, to the real modern day rugby, which was, I think, the sort of basis for where we are now with it.
Yeah. I mean, because ITV sent reporters to the camps, to the England camp, Irish camp.
In behind the scenes, nobody ever heard of that.
No. Yeah, it was fantastic fun, and as you say, the rapport and the camaraderie and as a rugby man, it's there in rugby, isn't it? But when you're working on the media on something concentrated like a World Cup or a Lions tour, it's there and it's every day, and it's a sort of.
And it was great, because back in the day, some of my best friends are the media. Even when I was playing, on a tour, I'd be playing chess with Roche, or and you knew everybody back in them days. Nowadays, a little bit with the sort of mainstay media, there's a bit of a standoff. It's a press conference. The managers don't really like media being in the same hotel as the players. In case they report something behind the scenes and stuff. But back in the day, the rugby media in our era they just want to report rugby. They want to report rugby and nice things, not digging up dirt about anybody. So it was a really nice time. And we travel around with all the media people, and they become friends. And that's right. I missed this week's rugby writers, for example, because it was in Egypt for a week of sun and sea and food. But I usually go to that, and that's great, just because everybody knows each other, and it's great. And it's a profession within everybody's in there. It's great. Back in the day, it was brilliant.
You've stayed in rugby, and yet you've also suffered personal tragedy and death very early on. I mean, that must have, I know it did. It hit you very badly, didn't it?
Yes, it did. She died of a brain tumor. It was a tough time for the family. You never quite know with grief how it's going to affect your kids, and how, as the only parent left, what to do. I did something that people probably have done it before, but I thought it was quite a novel idea. Once the funeral was done, I took me and my daughter and my son, we took them to Thailand, and we went to Thailand for a month. And we didn't want aunties and friends coming around with pasta because they don't think I can turn an oven on. We want to get away, and it was a real bittersweet holiday. In fairness, it was a lot of tears, but a lot of laughter. And I come back from that month away. We travelled all around Thailand and really to Chiang Mai, down to Phuket, to Bangkok, and I come back thinking, my kids are going to be all right, because that was my worry. Yeah. I think we're going to be okay. It's going to be tough, but I got to know my kids more in that month than I think I did over the last 20 years or so. Because although they were young 20s, they're still kids, But of course, then the year before Anne died, I lost my mum as well, and my brother lost his wife. And then, of course, I went down with this liver problem. So I was 5 months in a hospital. I was nip and tuck for a long time with me. And all I was worried about was, my kids. If, to lose their mum and their dad within a year is pretty tough in anybody's lifetime. So it was, I made mistakes trying to, over that last year. But generally speaking, they've come through, in my daughter and my son, I'm really proud of, and they're doing well in life now, which is great. It's a testament to them. They didn't allow the death of my wife to define their lives, and I think that's important.
Yeah, and on top of that, the liver problem. How did you get an indication that something was?
Can I say, I thought, oh my God, I'm putting a poundage on. I'll do a bit of weight training. I go to the gym. Went to the gym and pulled something in here. I had a little bit of a hernia. Went to the GP. Go up to the hospital. I went to a GP to have an ultrasound. Had the ultrasound, putting my stuff on to go, and thinking, they'll do something about that in a couple of months. And they just rushed in and said, you're not going anywhere. We've just sort of strayed onto your liver, and we think we found something. So, of course, originally I thought, oh my God, that's cancer. So they kept me in, they did tests, and they found out that my liver was a couple of weeks from completely closing down. It was a rare type of, and I'm talking medically, I don't know whether I'm saying it right, but it was a sort of a rare type of enzyme. So my children had to be checked, and that's fine, thank God. But from there, I lost instantly, I think it was 6.5 stone. They kept me in. They then moved me to King's up in London, which is one of the liver centres. And that was it, really. And I was struggling. They sort of said, look, they can't keep me alive for long. So they sent me back to Bristol to really get the family around. And I got back on the Saturday thinking, oh my God, the kids are coming in later on this afternoon. How am I going to tell them that, after what's happened with my wife, I might not get a liver in time, because I think liver transplants, most of them die before they actually get a liver. And next thing I know, within an hour and a half of me getting back to Bristol from London, they rushed into the room, quick, we're getting ready, they found a liver. So I was rushed back, blue lighted back up to London. Right. And literally by the night time, I was having a liver transplant. My daughter moved to London to be with me for, after the operation and that. I was in intensive care, in and out, and some of my stomach, intestines taken away because of infection. But hey, I'm here. I've put a bit of weight on, as you can see. It's still beautiful. And I'm back, and I'm fine. I take the anti-rejection tablets. It's funny, Higgy, you probably know as well as I do. The tablets they give me for the anti-rejection also gives me a higher chance of skin cancer, blood pressure, diabetes, sorry. So you've got to have all that checked and everything else. But, I'm very, very, very thankful, lucky that somebody had given me a liver, donated me a liver that kept me another now 6 years with my family. And that's the main thing.
Yeah, and it was an enzyme that caused the problem.
Yeah.
So do they work out why or how you got that enzyme?
No, I think it's one of those things that it's very rare, but it's in your DNA. Something will click it into sort of destroying it, because liver is, as you know, is one of the few organs, or I think the only organ it can remend itself, rebuild itself. And a lot of liver transplants is just half a liver, and it grows into a big one, or they cut half out. But mine was so bad that they had to take the full lot out and give me a brand new liver. And it was I don't know who it was. I've wrote to them, but they had to the family to see if they'd want to know how I was going on, but they haven't come back. But it was an Irishman who died in a car crash in London, and that's why it was so immediate, and that's why I was rushed back in. So very, very thankful, very, very lucky, and time's moved on.
You mentioned the anti-rejection drugs you have to take.
Yeah.
What other measures do you have to take to keep on top of things?
Well, the actual tablets are quite easy. Every morning, 7:30, I take 3 tablets. 2 were anti-rejection tablets. One's a blood pressure tablet, because rejection tablets push your blood pressure up. And then I get checked regularly for being diabetic. So I've got to watch what sugar I eat. My daughter's very good at keeping me, on the straight and narrow. I've got to keep the weight. I'm continuously told to lose weight, which I tend to do, and then it tends to go back on, usual stuff. But generally speaking, I feel great. I've just been to Egypt, swimming in the sea, and having that sort of lifestyle that, thankfully, with my travel businesses and everything else, I can afford to do. So I'm off again in a couple of weeks to the Canary Islands with my daughter this time. And then Christmas we'll go away with the whole family again. So, Iggy, I'm very, very lucky to still be here. And, the treatment I got, people sort of say about the NHS, but wow, fantastic. The Kings in London and Southmead in Bristol have been fantastic, and are still being fantastic, monitoring me, all the time.
Yeah, and the hospitality business that you're so successful in is also, it's connected with drinking as well, isn't it? And
it is, yeah. And when you're in Dublin, and you're watching Ireland beat England, and you think, well, I could do with a Guinness. I actually tried the non-alcohol Guinness this year. It was very good. But yeah, I don't. In fact, I've become everybody's best friend, Nicky, because I don't drink, but I still drive. So the lads this Friday will go, because there's no rugby on this out of season. Well, where are you going tonight, Coots? Pick us up. So it's. But I don't mind. I'm not one of these teetotalers that just sits at home thinking, well, I can't go in a pub because I can't drink. No, I'll go in a pub and I'll dance and do what's going on. And I'm that sort of guy. I can have fun even if I'm not drunk. So, and if I'm with friends, telling stories and starter, having a laugh, it's sometimes I miss it, on the big occasions when I'm dear friends, if me and you met up recently, and I'd have loved to have had a red wine with you like we have over many decades, but I would not be doing it this time. And I miss it occasionally, but whenever I feel like I could do with a drink, I just think back to the wires coming out in neck, in the pipes, in the masks, in the intensive care, and I think, I'll have a squash or a Diet Coke.
So you've done 6 years with a new liver.
Yeah.
What's the prognosis for the next few years?
I live from year to year now, Iggy. I don't know with this liver whether I'm going to make all bones. When I say all bones, 80, 90. Every year for me is a bonus. That's not saying I'm writing myself off. I'd like to, I'm 66 now. I'd like to get to a decent mid-70s before I even contemplate, diving down 6 foot or something. But yeah, and I just want to spend time with my family, with my friends, with my dog. And I'm in a nice place in the moment. I've had a couple of relationships since Anne died recently. But I'm single now. I'm on my own. I got my family. Got my dog. I got financially, I could do what I want when I want. I go on holidays, I walk the dog, I do a bit of painting, I go swimming every day. Hey, look, and I talk to great people like yourself, Iggy, old mates from yesteryear. I'm happy.
And the near future is this World Cup this autumn.
It's my dog down here if you think I'm scratching anything.
You've had
Sorry.
The near future is the World Cup this autumn.
Yeah.
That it's been a difficult few years in the hospitality business, hasn't it, with COVID?
COVID was a nightmare, especially with me, sort of sports travel. There was no crowds in the stadium and no travel. So, I mean, there's no doubt that furlough saved a lot of businesses in my profession. And thank God it did. But yeah, so it's all back. We're back to pro-COVID times. You know, my company Venator is doing really well. World Cup is going to be busy. I'll be there for 6 weeks or so, and I'm really excited this one. You know, because I think for the first time since 2003 or 4, when did we win the World Cup? 2003.
Yeah. 20 years ago.
My memory's going. I actually think the Northern Hemisphere could do well. You know, Ireland's everybody's favourite. I'm not so sure they'll win it, but they got a chance. Obviously, a big one. France are going to be difficult to beat in their own term. And you know, Scotland, Wales can beat anybody on their day. England have got such an easy run. You know, they don't meet anybody to the quarterfinal. Then if you get one game in a bit of a run for 2 games, next thing you know, we're in a final. Yeah. So I just think that New Zealand seem to be in a bit of disarray, even though never underestimate them. Australia, dear old Eddie's trying to get them in shape. And South Africa will be physical. So, but I think for the first time in a lot of years, a lot of World Cups, the Northern Hemisphere has got every chance of having a go. So I'm looking forward to that side. France is a beautiful country. And it's going to be great. Yeah, it's going to be great. I'm really looking forward to it.
And looking a bit further ahead, the future for our sport, is it as cloudy as some people make out?
I think it is. Yeah, I'd be worried. You know, I just think you've got to look at it as a business front. The game is unsustainable. You know, it's unrealistic to carry on in the domestic game the way it is. You know, we've probably got 3 clubs going bust in a year. Now, let me get something very firmly out there. I've got no problems with players taking money for the contract. You know, I don't blame the players 1 iota. The fact that they've been offered this sort of money, you know, is the problem. And somehow it's very difficult in the business to bring a marketplace down. But somehow they've got to bring the salary down, you know. And I'm not sure how you do that when you've got rich billionaire owners who are quite happy to carry on because it means they'll end up having the best players. But really, when you've got what I would call, and please, I'm not being disrespectful to anybody, but sort of general journeyman running the field, good top Premiership players, but not internationals, on 150, 200,000 pound plus, where 8 years ago you said, look, you're going to get 75 grand to pay for the club and play the sport you love. They'd have bit your hand off.
Yeah.
You know, somehow they've got to get the wage bill 50% less. And if that means a few stars go to Japan or France for the money, okay, France will have the same problem in 10 years' time if they don't control what they're doing now. Because the game, realistically, would never turn over the sort of salaries or the sort of income that football would do, you know? And until they get that realistic wage structure, still really good money for players. And it's very, and I don't know the answer of how to get from players earning that to players earning that, and they still be happy, but somehow it's got to. Otherwise, the game domestically, in the Premiership particularly, will be in a hell of a mess in a year's time. There's only so much income you can make because of the fans. You know, it's not a huge, it's a global sport, but it's not a football. So yeah, I'm really worried about the game. And I also worried about, you know, the suing of the RFU in the World Rugby, about, you know, head injuries. I think player welfare is utmost important, but, you know, there's ways of helping them without legal, I think. And also the society we live in now, let's upset everybody, but I'm not worried about being cancelled. I think the game mustn't ever lose its physicality. And I do commentating for Bristol, BBC Bristol and Somerset Sound, and I'm looking at tackles here, nothing. None of them are injured, nothing's, the crowd's booing. You go back and it's a slow motion glance, and this guy is yellow carded, and I end up saying, well, I don't really agree, but in today's rules, that man should be yellow carded, but really he shouldn't. And we'll know what a high tackle in a close hanger tackle should be, in their red carding and should be. But I think the game has got to never forget that it's it's a physical game, and if it loses that physicality, then I think that is a real slippery slope.
And much more important, if it loses the characters such as yourself, Cooch, it's going to go downhill further and faster. But for me, it's been a great game. It's been fantastic being able to meet you and talk to you and become a friend of yours. It's been great working with you. And today it's been great chatting to you and catching up on your life again. So Cooch, thanks so much indeed for joining Goldster today and Sporting Memories. Wish you all the best in the future, and particularly in the short term in the World Cup this autumn. Thanks so much, Cooch.
Iggy, you're a dear, lifelong friend. Look forward to catching up soon.
Take care.